Welcome to the Deep Dive. We dig into fascinating, sometimes complex sources, pull out the core insights, and bring them straight to you. Today, we're tackling something really intimate: grief, and how it looks when it spills onto our social media feeds. It feels like grief has almost gone viral, you know?
Yeah, it's a huge shift. What used to be maybe whispered conversations, very private moments, is now unfolding right there on our timelines. You see the heart emojis, sure, but also sometimes a lot of opinions.
Right, and that brings us to our sources for this deep dive. They've really looked into this tension, this kind of dual role social media plays when we lose someone.
Exactly. It can be this amazing, like, global support system popping up instantly.
Mhm.
Or it can actually make the pain worse,
Mm.
add stress in ways we maybe didn't expect. It complicates things.
So our mission today is really to unpack that duality. We want to go beyond just, pros and cons and understand why these platforms can lead to such different outcomes for people grieving.
hmm And the big question for you, listening as we explore this, is when you think about your own feed, your online spaces, are they set up to be a comfort, a place for connection during loss? Or could they maybe unintentionally be making a hard time even harder? Let's start with the good stuff first, the unexpected ways these platforms can actually help.
Okay, the bright side. But because it's important to say, these digital spaces, for all their issues, they really can be powerful allies when you're grieving. Just putting something out there, posting about a loss, it can feel like casting a lifeline.
Definitely. And the first big thing the sources point to is instant support networks. You share something and suddenly you're connected, not just with close friends, but maybe that relative overseas or old work friends or even, and this is key, total strangers who've been to the exact same thing.
People who just get it.
Right. They can offer a kind of comfort or understanding that maybe isn't available right there in your immediate circle.
And that reach, that sheer breadth of connection, it does so much to fight that awful feeling of isolation in grief, doesn't it? That sense that you're completely alone in this pain.
It really does. Sharing openly, it kind of chips away at the stigma around death and loss. It gives people permission almost to talk about how they're really feeling and find others who feel the same. It's like an antidote to that stiff upper lip, suffer in silence culture.
Yeah, yeah.
And another fascinating angle is how these platforms support what psychologists call continuity bonds. This is a way of thinking about grief where you don't just aim for closure and like cutting ties. Instead, you find ways to keep a connection with the person who died.
Okay, so how does social media change that? Because usually you'd think of that as something very private, right? Like memories or maybe
Well,
rituals.
online it becomes communal
Hmm?
and ongoing. People use their profiles, their timelines as almost living memorials. They share photo stories, they create these digital tributes. It's like a shared virtual scrapbook that anyone can add to.
A scrapbook, I like that.
And the sources suggest this is pretty radical because it's not just a one-off thing like a funeral. It's a persistent presence. Think about those on this day memory prompts or yearly anniversary posts. They pop up and they invite people to remember together year after year. It keeps the legacy alive in a very active way.
That feels like it could be incredibly comforting, that continuity. And, sometimes the best support isn't even emotional, it's just practical, taking something off your plate.
Oh, absolutely. Don't underestimate the practical help, especially those first few blurry days and weeks. Getting the word out quickly about a funeral or a memorial service, that's huge. It saves the grieving person from making dozens of painful, draining phone calls.
God, yes. That repetition must be exhausting.
Totally. And then you see the community jump into action with actual concrete help.
Yeah.
The sources mention things like, people organizing meal deliveries online, setting up crowdfunding for funeral costs or medical bills, coordinating childcare, just lifting those logistical burdens when someone's drowning in sorrow. That's a profound form of care.
It really is.
But, and this is where the research gets really interesting, we have to look at the other side of the coin. Because while social media can build these bridges, its fundamental design isn't really optimized for grief.
What do you mean?
Well, think about it. The algorithms are built for engagement, novelty, quick reactions, right?
Mm-hmm.
But grief is slow. It's messy. It's nonlinear. It often needs quiet, reflection, maybe even stillness. And when the platform's need for constant buzz clashes with the griever's need for maybe quiet space, that's where things get tricky.
Ah, okay. That collision. The platform wants attention, but grief needs insulation sometimes. What happens then?
Well, you see stress, you see vulnerability being exploited, maybe unintentionally, you see pain getting amplified. One of the biggest problems that sources found is this thing called comparative grief,
Hmm.
or even grief envy.
Grief envy. Wow, that sounds harsh. What does it actually mean? Is it just comparing how sad people are?
It's more about the performance of grief. You're scrolling, maybe feeling awful, and you see someone else's post about their loss. Maybe it's beautifully written, or they share photos of tons of flowers, or talk about all the support they're getting.
Okay.
And if your own grief feels messy or silent, or you feel alone, you start comparing. You wonder, am I doing grief right? Is my pain valid? Should I be posting something more profound? It sets up this weird standard for how grief is supposed to look online.
That pressure. And I guess that ties into the other problem, getting comments you really didn't ask for. Unsolicited advice, or worse, judgment.
Exactly. It turns sharing your vulnerability into like navigating a minefield. You throw your heart out and suddenly strangers are debating your choices or criticizing how you're handling things. That lack of control can be really jarring.
Yeah, terrifying even.
And then there's just the platform mechanics themselves. Those algorithms designed to resurface memories. Great for birthdays? Maybe not so great when an unexpected "on this day 3 years ago" pops up with a photo of the person you're desperately trying to mourn today. It can just ambush you, reopen wounds without warning.
Like weaponized nostalgia. It serves the platform's engagement goals, not necessarily your healing process.
Precisely. And while getting lots of comments feels like connection, the sources do point out that this digital interaction, it often lacks real depth. You know, a quick thinking of your comment, it's nice, but it doesn't replace a hug or a long talk or just someone sitting with you in silence. Quantity over quality, maybe.
Which could leave you feeling kind of hollow, even after sharing.
Yeah, and that leads right into regret. Someone posts something really raw, maybe hoping for support from close friends, but it gets seen more widely, and suddenly they're dealing with trolls or people making it about themselves or just noise.
And the research actually showed people sometimes felt lonelier after sharing online.
It did. It underlines that finding. Virtual support doesn't always equate to real presence. You can have hundreds of likes and still feel utterly alone. Plus, there's that constant low-level exhaustion from feeling you have to perform your grief publicly, make it look acceptable.
Okay, this is making my head spin a little. To make this more concrete, let's look at those real stories you mentioned earlier, the ones that show these two extremes playing out.
Right, let's ground this. Our first case, we'll call her Sarah, a young widow. Initially, she felt completely isolated after her husband died suddenly. Friends didn't know what to say. She felt cut off, just silence.
A common experience, sadly. So what changed?
She decided to post something on Instagram, but not a, polished tribute. It was raw.
Mm-hmm.
Old photos, honest captions about her daily struggles, just putting it out there.
Yeah.
The response was incredible, but very specific. Hundreds of messages poured in, mostly from other young widows, people who instantly understood her specific pain. That vulnerability attracted exactly the right kind of support. They even formed a private group chat.
Wow. So she found her niche.
Exactly. Her post ended up getting shared widely, like over 10,000 times, but the real impact was that targeted connection. She said it changed her grief from a solo battle into a shared story. She used the platform strategically to find her tribe.
That's a powerful example of the bright side. Okay, now contrast that with Mark's story.
Right, Mark. His experience shows the potential pitfalls. His father passed away, and he went to Facebook, poured out his shock, his sadness, in a really long, emotional post. He was looking for catharsis, connection.
And what happened?
Well, he got sympathy at first, but then the thread just kind of spiraled. People started debating details about his father's life. Strangers argued about the way Mark phrased things. Some people shared totally unrelated stuff. His space for grieving got hijacked. It turned into this public forum, almost hostile.
Oh no, that sounds awful.
He felt completely exposed, ended up deleting the whole post. He said something really telling afterwards, like, grief is not a spectator sport. It perfectly captures that feeling of your private pain suddenly being put on display, judged by an audience you never intended.
So his mistake, maybe, was not controlling the audience or the tone, just putting raw emotion out into the void.
Essentially, yes. He didn't set boundaries beforehand. Comparing him and Sarah, you see the difference. Sarah used the platform as a tool to find specific support. Mark kind of let the platform's public nature overwhelm his personal need.
Okay, so pulling this together from the sources and these stories, it's not just about whether you share, but how you share. There's a strategy involved if you want it to be helpful rather than harmful.
Precisely. It's not about banning social media during grief. It's about using it consciously. The successful users, like Sarah, seem to make deliberate choices.
So what does that look like? What's the framework for making those choices?
Well, the core idea seems to be balance is key, and boundaries protect peace. Based on what works and what doesn't, we can pull out a few key things to think about.
Like a mental checklist before you post?
Kind of. First, content pre-filtering. Before hitting share on something deeply emotional, ask yourself, is this truly for my healing, or am I feeling pressure to perform grief for others? If it's really raw, maybe limit the audience drastically. Use close friends lists, or maybe a temporary story instead of a permanent post.
Got it. Think about the why and the who before the what. What else?
Second, aggressive boundary setting. Sarah found her niche and probably tuned out the noise. You have to be willing to curate your experience. Mute notifications if they're overwhelming. Limit who sees your posts. Don't be afraid to unfriend or block people who bring negativity into your space during a vulnerable time. Protecting your peace is paramount.
Be your own moderator, essentially.
Exactly. And finally, offline balance is crucial. That feeling of loneliness after sharing tells us virtual connection isn't enough. Use social media maybe to coordinate real-world support. Arrange a call, plan a coffee date, ask someone to drop off groceries. Don't rely on the platform itself to be the support. Blend the online and offline.
That makes so much sense. Use it as a bridge, not the destination. So, recapping the big picture from our sources. Social media during grief is this double-edged sword. It can be amazing for building community, finding understanding, preserving memories through those continuing bonds, but it can also amplify pain through comparison, judgment, unwelcome reminders, and that exhausting pressure to perform.
Yeah, the key seems to be intentionality. Curate your feed, protect your space, know when to engage, and importantly, know when to log off entirely.
It really comes down to control, doesn't it?
It does, and that brings us to a final thought, really building on Mark's experience and that idea of performing grief. If making your pain visible online carries these risks, the judgment, the exposure, the potential for it to be turned into a spectacle, how do you decide? How do you draw the line between memories that feel sacred and private versus those that might actually benefit from being shared, from that collective healing power of a community? What's the real cost of seeking support when that support comes with an audience?